The red paint on a Ferrari isn't just a color, it's a warning. It's the hue of a heartbeat before it stops, or a marriage before it goes up in flames. My wife, Olivia, didn't think I knew about her escape fund. She didn't think I noticed the missing thousands from our joint consultancy business, or the way she'd been siphoning off our dividends into a private offshore entity for 3 years. She thought I was just a reliable, boring accountant named Steven who was too busy balancing everyone else's books to notice his own wife was cooking them. But at 10:15 a.m. on a Tuesday, my phone didn't just vibrate, it shrieked. A high-priority fraud alert flashed across my screen from our primary wealth management group. Attempted transaction, $342,000. Vendor, Rosso Corsa Exotic Imports. Confirm. This is a story about the ultimate financial showdown and what happens when a secret account meets a husband who knows where every penny is buried. Before we watch the world's most expensive purchase turn into the world's most public embarrassment, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and tell us in the comments. Would you ever keep a secret bank account from your spouse? Let's dive in. Olivia and I had built everything together, or so I thought. For 20 years, we were the power couple of the suburban elite. I handled the strategy, she handled the clients. But lately, Olivia had started acting like she was the sole architect of our fortune. She began talking about living her truth and how she felt stifled by the domestic routine. What she really meant was that she had found a younger, flashier crowd and wanted a lifestyle that didn't include a husband who preferred jazz and a quiet patio to rooftop bars and bottle service. She stood in our kitchen that morning, draped in a white linen suit that cost more than my first car, looking at her reflection in the toaster as if it were a crystal ball. "I'm going to be out late today, Steven," she said, her voice airy and dismissive. "I have a few personal errands. Don't wait up for dinner. I think I've finally outgrown this kitchen." I watched her walk to her SUV, her heels clicking against the driveway like a countdown. She thought she was heading to the dealership to buy her freedom in the form of a 200 miles per hour Italian masterpiece. She planned to drive that car home, pack her bags, and leave me in the dust, thinking she'd outsmarted the man who taught her everything she knew about finance. What she didn't know was that while she was siphoning money, I was building a safety net. Years ago, when we first set up our private banking structure, I insisted on a global security protocol. Because our names were legally intertwined on every corporate filing, any new account opened using our tax ID or shared business credits automatically triggered a mirror notification to my private device. Olivia thought she had opened a secret account. In reality, she had just opened a subfolder in a system I monitored daily. I saw the money moving for months. I watched her hide 50,000 here, 100,000 there. I could have stopped it early, but I wanted to see how far she would go. I wanted to see if there was any part of her that still valued us. But as I stared at the fraud alert for the Ferrari, I realized that us was dead. She was using the money we earned together to buy a car she only intended to drive away from me. I picked up my office phone and dialed the direct line for the bank's elite security division. My heart was thumping, not with fear, but with a cold, clinical precision. I had spent my life protecting people from financial ruin. Today, I was going to use those same skills to deliver a reality check that no amount of horsepower could outrun. "Security Department, this is Marcus," a voice answered. "Marcus, this is Steven Miller," I said, my voice steady as a rock. "I'm looking at a massive unauthorized draw on the Miller Trust subsidiary. I'm at my desk, and I'm looking at my wife's location on our shared family map. She's at a dealership, but I never authorized this withdrawal. I believe her identity, and our corporate credit, has been compromised. We need to initiate a full lockdown. Now." The Rosso Corsa showroom was a temple of glass and carbon fiber, a place where the air smelled like Italian leather and ego. I knew exactly what Olivia was seeing because I had opened the dealership's live inventory page on my second monitor. She was standing in front of a Rosso Magma Roma, a car that looked like a drop of blood carved into a weapon. I could see her on our shared GPS, a little blue dot hovering right over the sales desk. She was likely basking in the fawning attention of a salesman who saw a commission check with legs. "Mr. Miller, Marcus, the bank security officer," said on the line. "I see the transaction pending. It's a wire transfer request for $342,000. It's being initiated from a private account under the name Olivia Miller Personal Holdings. Are you sure you want to flag this?" as her husband and the primary guarantor of the parent trust. Once you flag this as identity theft, we have to freeze everything associated with your social security number and tax ID for 48 hours. Do it, I said, my voice like ice. I didn't authorize that account, Marcus. If she's using my credit score and our joint tax history to back that purchase, it's a breach of our trust agreement. Freeze the wire. Flag the card. Send the possible fraud notification to the vendor terminal immediately. Initiating now, Marcus replied. I leaned back in my leather chair, the silence of my home office suddenly feeling very heavy. I imagined the scene at the dealership. Olivia would be sitting in a velvet chair, sipping an espresso, talking about how she wanted the car delivered to her new private address. She would be signing the final papers with a flourish, feeling the thrill of the independent woman she pretended to be. The salesman, a guy who probably went by a name like Lorenzo and wore a watch that cost a year's salary, would take her black titanium card and slide it into the terminal with a practiced, elegant motion. He'd be smiling, talking about the engine's displacement or how the red stitching matched her lipstick. Then, the sound. Not the roar of an engine, but the sharp, discordant beep 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 of a rejected transaction. I watched my phone. At 10:28 a.m., the GPS shifted slightly. She was moving, probably leaning forward, confused. Try it again, she'd tell him. There must be a mistake with your machine. I have more than enough in that account. But I hadn't just stopped the car. I had frozen the escape fund itself. In the eyes of the bank, Olivia wasn't a high-net-worth client anymore. She was a suspicious actor involved in a potential identity takeover. Every penny she had spent 3 years hiding was now trapped behind a digital wall that only I, as the primary account administrator, could unlock. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Olivia. Hey, are you doing something with the business accounts? I'm trying to make a large purchase and the bank is being weird. Call me. I didn't call. I didn't text. I waited. 3 minutes later, she called. I let it ring until the very last second before picking up. Stephen, she hissed, her voice a frantic whisper. I could hear the background noise, the hushed, awkward murmurs of the showroom. Stephen, I'm at a store, and my cards are being declined. All of them. Even my private one. What is going on? That's strange, Olivia, I said, my tone conversational, almost bored. I actually just got a call from the bank's fraud department. They said someone was trying to use our joint credit history to authorize a massive wire for a luxury car. I told them it couldn't be you, since we never discussed buying a Ferrari. I told them to lock it down to protect our assets. You know how identity theft is these days. There was a long, suffocating silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, the moment she realized that the boring accountant had been 10 steps ahead of her for years. Stephen, you need to call them back, she said, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and humiliation. Tell them it's me. I'm standing here with the manager. People are looking at me. Tell them to release the funds. I can't do that, Olivia, I said. Not until we have a long talk about where that money came from and why you thought you could use our family security to buy a getaway car. The bank says you need to provide a secondary form of biometric verification at a physical branch. With me. In person. You're ruining this, she suddenly erupted, her voice rising so loud I knew everyone in that showroom could hear her. This was my moment. I worked for that money. I earned it. You earned it by skimming from our employees' pension bonuses and our shared dividends. I replied, the heat finally entering my voice. The manager is standing right there, isn't he? Why don't you ask him if he accepts stolen trust funds as a down payment? Because that's what the bank is calling it now. I heard a muffled voice in the background, the salesman, no doubt, asking if there was an issue. Olivia's voice was shaky now. I have to go. She hung up. I looked at the GPS. The blue dot was still at the dealership. She couldn't even call an Uber. I'd frozen the cards linked to her phone apps. She was a woman in $1 million showroom with a $0 reality. I sat in my armchair in the living room, the house bathed in the golden light of the afternoon, holding a glass of sparkling water. I wasn't drinking, I was waiting. The silence was absolute, a stark contrast to the storm I knew was barreling down the driveway. At 4:15 p.m., the sound of a taxi pulling up broke the quiet. I didn't get up. I heard the car door slam, a violent, metallic thud, and then the frantic fumbling of a key in the lock. Olivia burst through the door like a whirlwind of fury. Her white linen suit was wrinkled, her hair was disheveled, and the sophisticated mask of the high society director had been completely stripped away. She didn't look like a millionaire. She looked like a gambler who had just lost her last chip. She threw her designer handbag onto the foyer table so hard a porcelain vase rattled. "How dare you?" she screamed, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "How dare you humiliate me like that?" I was standing there, Stephen, in front of everyone. The manager, the staff, other clients. They were whispering. They looked at me like I was a common thief. Were they whispering, "Olivia?" I asked, not moving an inch. Or were they just witnessing the truth? You were trying to buy a car with money that didn't belong to you. In the world of finance, that's called a disputed asset. In the world of marriage, it's called a betrayal. She marched into the living room, pointing a trembling finger at me. That money was mine. I saved it. I managed the boutique accounts for 3 years while you were focused on the macro strategy. That was my commission, my hard work. The boutique accounts belong to the Miller Trust, Olivia, I said, finally standing up. I was a head taller than her, and for the first time in years, I let my presence fill the room. The trust that pays for this house, your clothes, and the very air you breathe. You didn't save that money. You embezzled it. You diverted client retainers into a shell company you registered in your maiden name. Did you really think I wouldn't see a Rosewood Ventures appearing on our tax nexus? Her eyes darted around, looking for a lie that would stick. I was building a nest egg. For us. For our future. Don't lie to me. I barked, the sound making her flinch. I saw the lease agreement for the apartment in the city. I saw the single status you checked on the Ferrari financing application. You weren't building a future for us. You were building a bridge to leave me, and you wanted me to pay for the bricks. She slumped onto the sofa, the rage suddenly replaced by a desperate, ugly sobbing. I'm unhappy, Stephen. Can't you see that? I'm bored, I'm stifled. I wanted something that was just mine, something that made me feel alive. So you decided to commit identity fraud? I asked, walking over to the fireplace. You decided to use my credit rating, a rating I spent 20 years keeping pristine, to back a loan for a supercar? If that transaction had gone through, our joint credit would have been over-leveraged by 40%. You would have tanked our ability to close the new development deal next month. I didn't think about the deal, she wailed. No, you didn't, I agreed. You only thought about the red paint and the wind in your hair as you drove away from the man who made your life possible. But here's the reality, Olivia. Because I flagged that account for identity theft, the bank has initiated a mandatory audit. They aren't just looking at the Ferrari. They're looking at every transfer into Rosewood Ventures for the last 36 months. Olivia stopped crying. Her face went a sickly shade of white. What does that mean? It means that by tomorrow morning, the bank will likely refer this to the authorities as corporate embezzlement, I said. Unless, of course, the primary victim, me, signs a waiver stating it was a clerical error and that the funds are being returned to the main trust immediately. She looked at me, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. You'll sign it? Stephen, please. I'll give it back. I'll stay. We can go to counseling. Just don't let them take me away. I looked at her, and for a second, I felt a flicker of the old love. But then I remembered the notification on my phone. The $342,000. The price of her freedom was exactly what she thought I was worth, a line item to be deleted. I'll sign the waiver, Olivia, I said, on one condition. But you aren't going to like the price of my signature. Olivia looked at me with the eyes of a person who had just realized the shore was much further away than she thought. What condition? She whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the air conditioning. I'll do anything, Stephen. Just tell the bank it was a mistake. I can't have a criminal record. My reputation, my social standing, it would be over. I walked over to my desk and picked up a single, thick document I had printed earlier that afternoon. I hadn't just called the bank. I had called my lawyer. I slid the papers across the coffee table toward her. This is a post-nuptial agreement and a voluntary asset forfeiture, I said. By signing this, you acknowledge that the funds in Rosewood Ventures were misappropriated. You agree to return them in full to the family trust. Furthermore, you agree to a no-fault divorce settlement where you waive any claim to my primary business holdings, this house, and the retirement accounts. Olivia's jaw dropped. You're taking everything? You're leaving me with nothing? Stephen, I've been your partner for 20 years. You stopped being my partner the moment you started being a thief. I replied. You wanted to be an independent woman in a Ferrari, Olivia. Well, this is what independence looks like. You keep your personal jewelry, your clothes, and the small savings account from before we were married. Everything else stays here, in the life you were so stifled by. She stared at the papers, her hand trembling. And if I don't sign? Then I don't sign the waiver, I said simply. The bank proceeds with the fraud report. The IRS gets a notification about the Rosewood offshore transfers. And I imagine the salesman at the Ferrari dealership will be more than happy to give a statement about the woman who tried to buy a supercar with a flagged account. The silence in the room was deafening. Olivia looked around the luxuries she had taken for granted, the art on the walls, the custom furniture, the security of a life well lived. She realized that the red car wasn't a getaway vehicle. It was the bait in a trap she had set for herself. With a sob of pure defeat, she reached for the pen. She signed her name on every page, her signature shaky and jagged. When she finished, she threw the pen onto the table and buried her face in her hands. I hate you, she sobbed. No, I said, picking up the documents and checking the signatures. You hate that you got caught. There's a difference. I walked to the door and opened it, the evening air cooling the heated room. Your taxi is still waiting at the curb. I told him to stay. I figured you wouldn't have a way to pay for another one once I finished the final block on your digital wallet. Olivia stood up, her movements heavy and slow. She didn't look at me as she walked past, clutching only her handbag. She walked down the driveway, the same path she had strutted down this morning in her white linen suit, and climbed into the back of a yellow cab. I watched the taxi pull away, its taillights disappearing into the dusk. I went back inside, sat at my desk, and sent a final email to Marcus at the bank. Client has rectified the clerical error. Funds returned. Case closed. I leaned back and looked at the empty house. It was quiet, peacefully, beautifully quiet. For the first time in 3 years, the books were balanced. Conclusion, the author's perspective. This is the ultimate lesson in financial and emotional literacy. Never assume the person who handles the numbers doesn't see the patterns. Olivia tried to use the very system that protected her to destroy the man who built it. She fell in love with a fantasy of independence, without realizing that real independence is earned through integrity, not siphoned through shell companies. Stephen didn't just stop a car purchase. He stopped a slow-motion wreck of a life built on deception. In the world of high finance and high-stakes marriage, the most expensive thing you can ever lose isn't a Ferrari. It's the trust of the person who has your back. Would you have given her a second chance, or was the Ferrari trap the final straw? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes karma, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and hit that bell. We've got more stories of justice and betrayal coming your way. Thanks for watching.